And here we are with Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio. Week 1, Nick. How's it going? It's been a while since we've spoken on the air.
Great to visit. Football season's here, so excited to get started.
So with all this time off, did you go to the beach? Did you get a big meal out, good restaurant, or you just been grinding?
This weekend, yeah, that was a fairly productive weekend. So we were able to, the pace was a little bit slower Friday, less people kind of around. Saturday, maybe we went down to College Station to get a little college football in. So for about a half, so it was good. And then just finishing off the preparations here for the Colts. We've done a lot of work over the summer through the spring, so you have an opportunity to get ahead. So, but we're in a decent spot.
As it pertains to that, Nick, and we've talked to different coaches, GMs over the years about how much prep do you do ahead of time? When do you start that prep? And how many teams do you do it for? I've heard some say, well, we do the first 4 teams, we do the first couple teams. How do you kind of go about the preseason prep to get you into week 1?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of balls in the air at different points. So the focus during the preseason for the coaches and the players is on the team and just kind of the preparation that goes into getting the team ready. From a scouting perspective, relative to prepping for the next opponent or for the first opponent, you'll have quality control coaches do some film work and some work behind the scenes on that. And then from a scouting standpoint, we'll identify each team, each opponent, we have a specific pro scout that advances that team. So roster construction, team building philosophy, coaching philosophy. So all that information is kind of populated, aggregated, and put together, and then they'll work through the spring just to refamiliarize themselves with that team and then track the team during the preseason. And then the final kind of first advance report will be put together once the final rosters are consummated. So in addition to the 53, we also keep track of who's on their respective team's practice squad, understanding at the end of the week you could have an elevation, which I would say in the Indianapolis case is a good example. So with Matt's situation, Matt Gay's situation, they have a kicker on the practice squad, so that could be somebody that potentially could kick in the game. So being cognizant of who those players are is important. So we have somebody working on Indy, if somebody working on Chicago, usually it's the first 2 opponents and then kind of flip the page. Once you get Indy behind you in terms of that preparation from advanced scouting standpoint, you start to look ahead to Minnesota. So it's week by week, but you're always trying to stay ahead as much as you can.
I got to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, your expectations and or projections adjust coming out of camp based on what happened in camp. Can you talk about camp? We talked to you the first day of camp, and it was a unique camp because you went up there to the Hall of Fame and had the week in Cleveland at your high school. We'll get into that. But the rest of it as you set up for the 2024 season.
Yeah, it was a really productive 6 weeks. So started early. We kind of embraced that, kind of getting here early and getting started. So it gave us however many 6 opportunities to kind of go out there and practice. And then we put the pads on. So we were a week or 2 ahead of the rest of the league. Play the Hall of Fame game, call it a game, and then, not a full game, half a game-ish, whatever with the weather. And then to be able to stay just in Cleveland for logistical reasons, a lot easier on the players, less travel, less back and forth, and we were able to get some productive work done. I mean, the weather cooperated for the most part. The field was a little wet at times that Tuesday or whatever it was, but we were able to work around it and then went ahead and played the game at Pittsburgh. So overall, we felt like it was a productive 6 weeks, put the foundation of the team in place, and then kind of finalized. We're probably, when camp started, realistically, we're probably talking about the last 8 to 10 roster spots. The rest of the team, you would think, was fairly solidified. Now, if something was out of whack, then we got to get it fixed. Then maybe this player didn't pan out the way we had originally thought or hoped. We let the competition sort itself out. We're not going to make any preconceived judgments or notions about what we think is going to happen or what maybe somebody wants to happen. Trust the information that we have, make a good decision, and ultimately put the team together, which is what we try to do.
Nick, you just mentioned something that Marc and I have talked about, and I think there's one player that kind of exhibits that maybe more than anything else, and that's British Brooks. And what I mean by that is you have draft picks, and people would think, well, you put a 3rd-round pick on this guy, and this guy's an undrafted. Well, of course, that 3rd-round pick is going to get more attention, and he's going to move in front of the other guy. But it really sort of worked out that British Brooks took every opportunity he had and made the most of it. It really kind of epitomizes what you talk about, and that being competition. Is that kind of the way you saw it with a guy like British?
Yeah. Once players walk in the building, everybody is treated the same. So whether you were drafted, whether you were undrafted, everybody gets the same opportunity. So ultimately, the performance on the field is going to dictate the decisions that we're going to have to make as a team and as an organization. So in British's case, I would say that's a good example of the scouting process as well, where we allocate significant time and resources to call it the late drafted to undrafted player pool, who we think potentially is going to be And British was a player that we identified, if we had the opportunity to get him in the building, that we would want to work with him. So there was definitely competition for him at the end of the draft. And there was somebody in the spring. There's some other teams that were tracking. It was more so the concept of the player. We thought he had size, strength, pretty sturdy build.
Yep.
Running back, but also maybe the ability to make a contribution in the kicking game. So, and I'd say British is an example of a player who came up. He was out there every day. He worked hard. He improved. He took advantage of his opportunities, developed some degree of versatility for himself. So we'll see what that actually looks like on game day. We're going to have to make 5 or 6 players inactive each week. So who we actually take to the game based on A, who's available, and then B, what are our needs that particular week.
Well, we know Troy's on the practice squad. British played some fullback. We've talked a lot of fullback in the last few weeks, Nick. How do you use the fullback position now? How do you implement that into the offense? And I know it's not used on every play, but it's a factor.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the overall composition of the game plan. Like, what do you want to get accomplished? Are we going to do a little bit more 11, or is it going to be some 21? Is it going to be some 12? So whatever Bob and the offensive staff feel and D'Amico feel make the most sense, like that's how we'll approach it. So we're going to take probably 20-ish offensive players, 22, 23 defensive players. So whoever's at the game is going to have some degree of a role. So how big or how small, the game will dictate, if you put something out there. I mean, typically teams will go through first 15 or 20 plays, sprinkle in a bunch of different personnel groups, see what's working. You might find, this doesn't work. All right, we're not going to really use this the rest of the game, or maybe it doesn't give us the perceived advantage that we thought it was going to provide. So we'll see how it all transpires here this week. So practice, we'll start practicing. We'll see what makes the most sense, and then we'll take whoever we think can help us win the most to the game.
In my mind, I was going to ask you about Anthony Richardson, and I thought, you know what? Let's just do it. We do this about this time in every interview. Once we get to game week,
right,
and we're going to have 13 in a row, so we better get used to this. Scouting report, Indianapolis Colts. I mean, we just saw them seemingly in Week 18, but we know Week 18 to Week 1, it can be a completely different looking team. Scouting report on the Indianapolis Colts, Nick.
Yeah, really good football team. Arguably, I mean, they were a playoff team essentially last year. I mean, that last game was essentially a playing game. So I think the term that kind of stands out when you read about them, when you watch them, when you study them, is explosive. So, and they've talked about a little bit on their end as well, the ability to create explosive plays on either side of the ball. And offensively, it starts with Anthony, no question about it. I mean, he's very unique. There's not many quarterbacks like him. Tackling will be at a premium. When JT puts his hands on the ball, literally he can score from anywhere. I mean, we've seen that 80-yard runs. He got out loose there. What was a 50-yard run-ish or whatever it was, missed the tackle, and then there he goes to the second level. So explosive players at the skill positions really made the addition. Downs is injured. We'll see whether or not he plays, but, I mean, Pittman has been as consistent a player as any receiver in the league. Pierce sounds like he's had a pretty good training camp, has improved, and AD Mitchell is going to add pretty significant impact to their offense. Very uniquely skilled player from Texas. Kind of have the offensive line intact. So good football team, good offensively. Shane does as good a job as any offensive coach in the league, no question about it. And on the defensive side of the ball, everything starts with the front. I mean, this is as good of a front we're probably going to see here all season, just collectively top to bottom. So talk about the starters, then when you look at their depth as well, but I mean, everything starts with Buck and Grover. Latu's probably going to end up being one of the better pass rushers in the league. I mean, this guy is very uniquely skilled. He's very technical, knows how to rush. He'll be a problem. He's going to be a problem not only for us, but for a lot of teams. And then Quiddy, it looks like he's had a pretty good training camp. He's got some good snaps. They got good depth behind them. And then, two of the more underrated linebackers in the league. Everybody talks about Zaire, and rightfully so, but EJ Speed has really emerged as a really good defensive player. And kind of the seventh defender, however you want to call it, with Kenny Moore in the nickel slot. Really good nickel. Young players on the perimeter or corner. We saw Brents last year. We saw Jalen. It looks like Cross is going to pencil in next to Blackman at safety, who was injured. So this is an explosive team that is capable of affecting the game on either side of the ball in the blink of an eye.
Well, I know it's hard to quantify, but I can't imagine a bigger opening game. They're all big opening weekend, but this is huge to go up there and play them in this setting after what happened last year, after what happened in all of history. So how do you think that affects the way the team approached training camp and the way they responded? I know it's hard to gauge, but what do you think?
Yeah, on the road, in-division opponent, good football team, hostile environment. I think that's kind of what the expectation is. So you understand, when you go up there, that's the environment that you're facing. So most important thing is going to be our preparation. Make sure we're doing the right things that are conducive to winning. Make sure we have a good week of preparation. identify some of the keys. D'Amico will go through the keys in all three phases of what we have to do in order to win the football game on Sunday. Then we have to go out there and execute. Then it'll be about the players and their ability to execute under, I would say, difficult circumstances. Everything gets heightened because of the opener, week 1 in the NFL. There's always a lot of uncertainty, but in the end, it's going to come down to good execution and who makes the winning plays when it matters most.
Nick, with so little preseason tape for certain players, a guy like Latu is really interesting to me because he is unique as a rusher because of how long he is and how good his hands are. That step through cross chop is incredible. But do your college scouts get involved in the actual scouting process because they've seen these guys a number of times? Do they get involved in it, especially early, because you don't have a lot of tape on these guys?
Yeah, no, we have a reference point. All the information that we've accumulated goes into our database. So if we can always go back and see what did Zeke, what did John Richard, what did we think about that player at the various interactions?
Sure.
And then evaluate what we see on film, which at times can be limited.
Right.
And then part of the advanced scout's job is to kind of track the team during the course of the preseason, some of the discourse, some of the things that are being discussed, try to get a gauge as best you can about what's going on with that team. So this is where kind of with week 1, there's some unknowns. You're going to have some players that literally haven't taken a snap in the preseason, and you haven't seen them, even if they've been in the league with their respective team, or they're a rookie and they haven't taken a snap. So you go back to the information that you have. You can't make it up. And then just try to, as best you can, identify the players' strengths, weaknesses, what they do well, what do we think the role is going to be. And then once the game kind of declares, we get into the game a little bit, we'll kind of have a better sense and negate, well, this guy's maybe a little faster than we thought, or, whoa, this guy's get off is better than maybe it looked on film. So that's where some of the adjustments take place during the course of the game.
Nick, how tough is it physically for guys who really haven't played in a full game yet? They've played a quarter plus, whatever the amount is. And obviously you've been working hard to get ready for this, but now you've got to play in a full game. And then the next week, another full game. How do they respond physically and gear up for that?
It's a big challenge. There's no question about it. Some players have played literally 20 snaps. Other players have played maybe 100 snaps. So your preparation, your routine, what goes into getting yourself ready to play. And this is where I think some of the improvements and resources that we've allocated on the sports performance front are available to the players, from nutrition to recovery to training to strength and conditioning. Matter of fact, we have some players that are in the weight room here today going through whether it's getting extra stretching. So you want to make sure you're physically and mentally as prepared as possible. What do you need to do during the course of the week? And this is where some of the data and some of the tracking can provide us some information, and we'll use that information to the best of our ability. So as long as we're putting the player in the best position possible where they can go out there and perform at an optimum level, ultimately is the most important thing.
It's pretty easy to look at Anthony Richardson and see, my God, 6'5", 245. But what makes him dangerous, Nick?
Just such a unique size, speed. His speed for not only a quarterback, but just as an offensive player, you can't underestimate how big and fast he is. And his arm strength is as good as anybody in the league. So he's a very, very unique player, which in the early part of the year, go back to the early part of 23, Shane did a really good job of putting him in positions, and we saw it firsthand in week 2, where, I mean, we couldn't stop him for 2 drives, and it's 14-0, and then we were kind of playing from behind the 8 ball there. So he's just very unique. There's not many quarterbacks like him, so he's healthy. It sounds like he's had a good training camp, so he's going to provide a significant challenge to our defense. There's no question about it.
When you fill up the practice squad with players, how much of that is, for lack of a better way of putting it, practice? Because you have to have the look team simulate what the opponent's going to do, but you want these guys to be able to play at the same time. How does that factor into the selection process? And let's talk about quarterback as well, because you had to fortify there with the injury to Case.
Yeah, it's twofold. So we're really thinking about the Texans first. So how do we get the best, call it 69, 70 players just on campus? How do we do that? We have, I don't know, a handful, half a dozen new players that weren't here that we evaluated that with other teams. Some of our players who maybe we wanted to get to the practice squad, they ended up somewhere else. So start with the Texans, and then once we get into practice, the players understand. D'Amico articulates it very well. Our job is to kind of get this cohort of players ready to play. Right. So part of your job on the practice squad is to do that, or whatever your role might be. So you're preparing to play. By the same token, we'll have scout team meetings where we'll give the Houston offense, the players that are going to be giving the look for the other side of the ball, here's what we need. Here's what this technique might be different from what we're teaching. So try to, hey, do it this way so that we can work against it, so that you're trying to help your teammate get better and get them ready to play. So it's kind of twofold. But again, it goes back to the Texans. Are we getting the right players with the right mindset in the building? And then hopefully they can go out there and perform the job that we ask them to do on a day-to-day basis.
Nick, is there a level of, in some sense, curiosity? You put this team together, the pieces that, come together, and you're like, okay, I like how it looked in training camp, but now you go into a week-long, all right, now we're playing games. Now the starters are playing a full 60 minutes. Is there kind of a level of curiosity of how's this all going to look once we get it on the field? Because we have an idea of what it might be, but, man, I'm kind of curious of what it will be.
The early part of the season, that's where you kind of get a real good idea of what your team is probably going to look like for the duration of the year. So we've put together what we feel is a competitive team that gives us an opportunity to go out there on Sundays regardless of who we play. So, again, once we actually get into the game, we're talking about 65, 70 plays roughly on either side of the ball. So what is that going to look like? Nobody really knows because we haven't done that.
Right.
So, we're going to learn a little bit as we go, but I think if we just identify the right players with the right traits and characteristics and then put them in a position where they're going to have some success, understanding we're going to have to deal with some challenges relative to the opponent, then, like I said, we'll have a better idea probably by the end of September about maybe where we are, or maybe confirm or refute where we are on some players. Yeah.
All right, we didn't get a chance to talk to you during the Cleveland trip, but we went to the house that Nick built, the university school.
A lot better players have been through that program than me. So
their facilities. I was blown away by how much land they had. A lot of land. I thought this is a huge footprint and good practice facility. You had the artificial surface and the other. So I thought it really worked out well. Did you see it that way from a pure Texans football standpoint and you getting to go back home?
Yeah, me getting to go back home is low on the totem pole.
On your priority list, but everybody was watching you with all your pals and everybody showing up.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's roughly 100 acres, so it's a massive amount of land, to your point, Mark. So it really worked out well, I think, for everybody. The big thing is more logistically making sure that it's functional. And between the weight room, between the practice fields, we had the turf availability. Hopefully we were able to get a lot accomplished, and we were isolated there a little bit, which was great. So kind of away from everything. So where the focus is just on the players that we had there on our team. And when we were away from practice and when you're away from the building, you're just spending time amongst each other. So overall, it was a great experience, from the Hall of Fame experience where we're able to go and watch Andre's induction and to being together, at US for that week, and then culminating with the Pittsburgh trip. So overall, it was a fairly productive week, and, we're definitely thankful to University School for accommodating us and providing us that opportunity. And, hopefully they got a new field out of it, I guess, a new practice field. So hopefully it works to their advantage.
Oh, good.
I know you were like, well, okay, me going back home had nothing to do with it, but there had to be a part of you that was like, man, I'm getting to see family. You're bringing your team up there, so people are getting a chance to see that. That had to be something for you, though, for your family, friends, be able to see that.
Yeah, not my team.
I know you're in work mode. I get it, but still.
The big thing, I was able to see my mom, dad, my brother. Yeah. So my immediate family is right there. I mean, honestly, about 15, 20 minutes from where we were. Cool. So that was, be able to do that. We just don't have the ability to do that as much as we would like to. So everybody's in Ohio. We have our family here. Like, we're Texans right now. We've been here. This is going on 4 seasons now. So our girls are kind of assimilated here. So to be able to be around them and just have the ability to spend a little time with them. Had dinner with my dad and my brother on Sunday. Was able to have, go to church with my mom, have breakfast. So, I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to do that. So where it's not about football, it's about, family and things that are a little bit more important. So, so it was, they were probably more excited than I was because it's work related, but in the end, we still love each other.
But there was a WWE event. Did you skate out for it?
There
were a lot of people that went to it.
I got asked about that a lot, so I didn't partake in that. So I stayed away from that. So I'm sure it was exciting.
Well, Johnny and I hit Bob Evans every day for lunch.
Every day.
On your behalf. I know you probably
used to go there for breakfast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would go there for breakfast.
That's what we had, breakfast for lunch, because you have to.
A quick story with a question. We're sitting there, and we are wearing Texans gear.
Oh, yeah.
And our waitress comes up, and she's like, and she's starting to try to learn all the NFL. She tells us she's trying to learn the NFL teams. And we're like, oh, okay. She seems sort of interested. And she's like, yeah, my son is Rasheen Ali.
for the Ravens.
Running back,
Martian.
Mark,
Yeah.
Shaker Heights.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I put it all together. I was like, oh,
we
Rasheen
visited
Ali.
Rasheen. I think we had some interaction with him prior to the draft. So.
Yeah, so his mom was asking us all. She wanted to call
world.
us Titans at first, and we're like, whoa.
It's
whoa.
blasphemous to say that around here. So
Exactly,
hopefully she
right.
avoided that.
Nick,
So.
thanks a lot. Good luck this week.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.